Hello and welcome to Nebula Talks. Before we begin, we have a few updates and reminders for you. We would love to have you be part of our Nebula community. And you can do so by logging on to www.nebula.com, where you can join communities related to your area of interest, register for upcoming Nebula Talks, book one-to-one skylifts, and view other upcoming events. You can also take this opportunity to connect with fellow learners or the speaker by sending a connection request. When you connect with the speaker, you will be able to contact them directly as well as receive updates about their upcoming talks. Kindly note that during this session, you will not be able to switch on your camera or unmute your mic. To ask questions during the talk, go to the audience chat, type your question, and select Post Your Question. If your question has not been answered during the talk, you will be notified once it's been answered, or if your question has not been answered during the talk, you can go to www.nebula.com and spin a quest, and your questions will be answered. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this talk broadens your horizons and takes you to new learning heights. Hi everyone, welcome to another IELTS Nebula Talk. My name is Sarah, and today we're going to go through how to improve your spoken grammar for the IELTS, especially for the speaking section. So without any further ado, let's get started. Give me a minute while I share my screen. All right, we had a bit of a technical issue there, but we're back on track. So like we talked about, today we're going to learn how to improve our spoken grammar. Okay, we're going to improve our grammar skills for the IELTS speaking section. All right, so just before we get into today's talk, we're just going to touch on the IELTS speaking section in general. All right, just to recap for you all. Again, if you are a first timer who's coming in and just wants to know a little bit about the IELTS, today we are covering the section, the speaking section of the IELTS. Again, there are 3 other sections, which are the reading, the writing, and the listening. Okay, and for those of you who have already started your preparation or who have probably already taken the IELTS, this is just a quick recap for you. All right, so remember the IELTS speaking section lasts for 11 to 14 minutes. All right, so as opposed to the reading section that lasts for an hour, or the listening section that lasts for 30 minutes, or the writing section that lasts for an hour, this is just 11 to 14 minutes. All right, now during this 11 to 14 minutes, you have 3 parts which you have to cover. The first part is called the introduction and the interview, where you will just be asked questions about yourself by the examiner. All right, just where you're from, where you live, and different questions like that. So it's kind of easy because, again, section 1 is all about you, or part 1 is all about you. Then you move on to part 2, which is termed as the long turn, okay, where you get 2 minutes to speak about a given topic to use. So you have 1 minute preparation time. You get a cue card, which has a statement and some questions which you have to answer. You get 1 minute to prepare that. And then you get to speak on that topic without being interrupted by the examiner for 2 whole minutes. Okay, and after you have spoken for the 2 minutes, the examiner will tell you your 2 minutes is up, and they'll probably ask you a couple of follow-up questions. And then you move on to part 3, which is the discussion. Now, what happens here is that the questions that are asked in part 3 relate to the question that was there in part 2. All right, so it's kind of an abstract way of asking the questions. Now, what I mean by that is if, for example, the cue card you're given talks about, tell me about your favorite holiday that you took, you should mention A, B, and C. The discussion part, the questions that might be asked would probably be related to tourism or something about travel in general. Okay, so that's what I mean by abstract. Okay, so now we got a general idea of the IELTS speaking section and how it works. Now, this section might be a little difficult for some students, especially because if you're not confident speaking, or maybe you practice so much, but then when you get to the exam room, suddenly the nerves get to you and you get really nervous and you just forget what to say. So that's why it's very important not only to practice, give your time equally to each section, but really practice if the speaking section is something that intimidates you. But what I tell a lot of my students is that this section, again, only lasts for 11 to 14 minutes, and that's it, and you're done. So just think of it as just a normal conversation between you and the examiner, and don't get super nervous. Okay? Now we're going to move on to today's topic for the talk, which is again grammar and how to improve. But first, let's understand the importance of grammar for the IELTS speaking exam. Okay, so first of all, English grammar is the foundation of all our writing and speaking skills in the English language. Okay, it's an essential part of the English language, especially for speaking. Now, when it comes to IELTS, your grammar really matters for the speaking section and the writing section. Okay, and during your IELTS speaking exam, again, when you're speaking, you're unconsciously letting the examiner know your command over the English language. Okay, and grammar is important for the proper formation of sentences, right? Everything that we speak, it's all grammatical. So if there are some mistakes, the examiner will be able to understand that, okay, there's a bit of a mistake going on here. So that's why it's important to practice your speaking skills and especially your grammar. And why it's also part of your score. Now, as you can see in the left corner, the grammar accuracy, grammatical range and accuracy is worth 25% of your score. So it's what you're going to be scored on. Another, besides grammatical range and accuracy, you're also scored on pronunciation, your lexical range. All right, so those kind of things. So this is worth 25% of your score, which is why it's also equally important to focus on. Okay, and as we just talked about scoring, grammatical errors can lower your score drastically. So don't get afraid. It's something that can be worked on, but you need to know why grammar is important. All right. Now let's go on to know about the common spoken grammar errors and how we can kind of overcome them. Okay. So this talk is not really a grammatical lesson. All right, I'm not going to be teaching you grammar rules or anything like that. I'm just going to talk about the common spoken grammar errors that are there and how you can improve, especially for the IELTS speaking exam. First of all, an error that students tend to make are tense errors. Now, this is not only in the IELTS speaking exam, this is also generally in daily life. So that's why when you're learning these rules or when you're learning grammar and things like that, even if you're preparing for the IELTS, don't think that you're just learning these things for the IELTS exam. You're also learning these skills that you can use in daily life. Okay? Right? So going back to error 1, which is tense errors. So let's look at these example questions first. Okay? One of the questions that could be asked, okay, this might be a part 3 kind of question, or it could be in part 1, right? You could be asked, did you like to play sport as a child? All right. So this question relates to the past. So you need to answer in the past tense. Okay. So if you're answering and if you're saying, yeah, I like to play sport, I play sport all the time, your answer will be kind of wrong because you're speaking in the present tense. But the examiner asked, when you were a child, did you like to play sport? So you need to answer in the past, say, as a child, you need to kind of rephrase it as well. But as a child, I liked to play sport. I played, and name the sports that you played. All right. Second one, how do the diets of people in the past compare with diets of people today? Now, this could be some sort of part 3 type of question, which is in relation to part 2. Okay. So now this is a mix of past and present. All right. So the question is, how do the diets of people in the past, so there's the keyword in the past, compare with the diets of people today, which is present tense? All right. So your answer should be a mix of past tense. So you can say something like in the past or rephrase it. That would be better. In the past, people used to eat a lot of healthy food. But nowadays, and using key vocabulary as well, nowadays people tend to order, and what they order is unhealthy, etc., right? So it's a mix of past and present. All right. And now let's look at an example of future tense. How much traveling do you hope to do in the future? Your answer needs to be in the future. All right. Not maybe answering in the past, like I traveled a lot when I was younger. Okay. So you need to kind of bring in the future. What you can do is, I hope to travel to, maybe give some country names and things like that, and say, give a story as well. Like, again, you can bring in the past, but make sure you answer the question in the future and then bring it up. Now, when I said you can answer in the past, it could be something like, I used to travel a lot as a child, but now I don't, but I hope to travel next year to Europe. with my family. You can do something like that, okay? But make sure you answer the question and make sure it's in the correct tense. So how can you improve your tenses? When you're speaking, make sure you have good knowledge of the present, past, and future simple tenses, right? To get you through the test. All right, you don't need to learn anything super complicated. Again, when you're speaking to the examiner, it should sound natural. So don't mug up or don't try and memorize a whole bunch of sentences, because again, that there comes an issue that maybe you won't be asked that certain topic or that question, and then you'll get muddled up, and then you'll start getting stressed during the exam, and then it won't work out. All right, so just learn the simple tenses, and it should be able to get you through. Okay, let's look at some practice tasks as well. All right. So first of all, this is the cue card like we talked about. For part 2, for example, describe a party you went to recently. Now see, this question is in the past tense, something that you did already, but you did it recently. So you need to talk about what the party was for, where the party was, what the most fun aspects of the party were. Now you can see is given in the past tense, your answer needs to be in the past. All right. So I went to my best friend's birthday party, which was last week. Okay. It was at her house. It was a surprise party. The fun part about it was that it was a surprise, so she had no idea, etc., etc. Right. So the answer is in the past. All right. Let's look at another practice task that we have here. Describe a well-known person you like or admire. Okay, now what is this? This is in the present tense. So when you're answering, you need to speak in the present tense. Okay, you need to tell who this person is, all that stuff. All your answers need to be in the present. Okay, so keywords are in the question. Look at it very carefully, understand what is being asked of you, what you need to answer, and also make a note of the tense that you have to speak in. Now, again, when you're preparing in that 1 minute preparation time, make sure you note this down. All right, that's why that 1 minute preparation time is there as well. Also, when you're practicing, make sure that you can get this time in, maybe like that 30 seconds to figure out things, so that, you know, when it's the day of the exam, you know exactly how to tackle these questions. All right, let's move on to error number 2, which are pronoun errors. Okay, so let's just do a little recap about what pronouns are. Pronouns basically take the place of nouns in sentences. All right, so in order to avoid grammar errors, the pronoun has to agree with the noun that it's replacing. All right, sounds a little theoretical. All right, let's just look at it practically. So first of all, let's look at these examples here. Anna and Pat are married. He has been together for 20 years. Okay, so here it sounds quite incorrect, right? Anna and Pat are plural. And then we go to the next after the comma or after the colon, he is singular. So the sentence should actually read as Anna and Pat are married and they have been together for 20 years. Okay, so that's the pronoun. You can't talk about one person if you mention two. You need to make it collective and say they. Okay, let's look at the next one. I fed all of her fish, then cleaned its tank. Okay, right? So here, the actual sentence, it takes the place of the plural phrase, all of her fish. Okay, so basically it should be used as a plural pronoun, as in I fed all her fish, then cleaned their tank. All of their fish is collective, so there were not just one fish in the tank, there were many fish in the tank. So you need to say their, okay, not it, not just one fish. All right. Okay, and let's look at another example, the last one here. When the girls on the team got to the hotel, they dropped off her luggage. Girls on the team, and they confirm that this sentence has a plural subject. So the singular her in her luggage is actually wrong, right? So as you can see, when you read it out loud, it doesn't really sound right. So actually, it should read as when the girls on the team got to the hotel, they dropped off their luggage, right? Girls are plural, so they. Okay, so these are the kind of errors that could be made to make sure that the pronoun agrees with the noun that it's replacing. All right. Next error, students are sometimes unaware of basic grammar topics. Now, let's just quickly recap what basic grammar topics are. Again, this is not a grammar lesson as such, but we'll just go through them quickly, which is basically the parts of speech in the English language. There are nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and introductions. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about what these are, but do understand your basic grammar topics, right? And the different parts of speech in the English language. Now, this is a bit fundamental. This is what they teach us at the beginning, but again, it doesn't hurt to recap, okay? Error number 4 is missing out articles. This is quite common, and again, just like missing out on pronouns, right? This is something that also makes your sentence sound a little different to the ear, okay? So the main articles that we're talking about right now are a, an, and the, okay? And it's really important to know and understand when to use what article or which article, okay? So first of all, for example, if you're talking about a, the usage of a, you use it with nouns in the singular form. So a ball, right? A car, a plane, etc. Easy examples. Now, when you use an, it's used with nouns starting with the vowels of English. Again, you all know this, A, E, I, O, U, and then with some exceptions of sound. Okay, so an apple, an elephant, okay? And then the usage of the, right, with superlatives, okay? So when you want to say something, if you're describing something, oh, it was the worst, it was the best, or it was the most impressive thing I've ever seen, right? So those are superlatives. Also, with words having an entire world, right? So the globe, the atmosphere, the internet, right? So you might have to speak about some kind of technology, so the internet, right? Okay. And then you have words with a particular focus in a sentence. So for example, the river, the government, the hospital, okay? And last but not least, whenever a country is named in the plural, right? So for example, the United Kingdom. So if you were asked, where do you plan on studying? I plan on going to the United Kingdom, okay? Or the UAE, right? Because Emirates is plural, kingdom is plural, okay? The Netherlands, okay? So that's when you have to use these, all right? So make sure you understand when to use which article, understand the articles as well, because if you miss out the article, again, like I said, it sounds a little different to the ear, and that could cost you marks, all right? And last but not least, error number 5, which is preposition errors, okay? So when we say prepositions, basically it's another part of the English language, part of grammar. Okay, so we're talking about prepositions like in, on, under, over, all those things. All right, so it's important to practice the prepositions. Now let's just look at the common errors of prepositions which are done by students. So for example, I was into the class. So correct usage would be I was in class. Okay, so you don't need to add, into, you can just say in. All right, so another example, my parents got angry on me, right? So it doesn't really sound right. The correct way of saying it would be my parents got angry with me, or my parents were angry with me, right? With you, not on you, okay? And last example, I'm not sure on this task. So if you maybe just don't understand what the examiner is saying, you say, I'm not sure about this task, or I'm not sure on this task, they'll be like, okay, that didn't sound right. So instead, like I just said, I'm not sure about this task. Could you please repeat the question, etc., right? So make sure that you understand where to use which prepositions and practice using those prepositions. Okay? Right. Now, let's look at some tips to improve your grammar for the IELTS speaking exam. First of all, make sure your simple sentences are correct. All right? Like I said before, there's no need to learn super complicated sentences when you're speaking. Make sure it's just simple. You can, of course, go a step ahead if you have prepared and practiced enough to do some complicated sentences, and that's perfectly fine. But again, if you're doing that, make sure then your simple sentences and your complicated sentences are correct. All right. Second of all, link simple sentences with coordinating conjunctions, right? Also use complex sentences linked with subordinating conjunctions. So for example, coordinating conjunctions like after, as, although, because, before, even if, since, then, though, until, whenever, while, etc. Those kind of give you a boost in your score. So try and do that as well. Use complex sentences linked with those words that we just talked about. Okay. Next, attempt a variety of structures. Now, again, this might sound complicated, so that's why I'm not saying learn complicated sentences, but try and use a variety of structures. Okay, so you can use simple tenses like we talked about, past, present, and future. You can also use perfect tenses, conditionals, relative clauses. Again, since this isn't really a grammar lesson, I'm not going to go into detail and tell you what exactly those are, but try and use a variety of structures. Okay, there could be some common structures that you could use for certain topics. Again, this could be in part one also when you're speaking about yourself. So you can learn those and keep those in mind. All right. Next one is quite important. Be aware of your errors and learn how to correct them. Now, how can you do this? You can definitely practice with a partner, whoever's at home, maybe your friends, your parents, your siblings, whoever's at home, who can correct you as well. So when you're speaking, they can just tell you, hey, you're making an error here. Okay. And then understand how you can correct it to make sure that your sentence is perfect. All right. Again, while you're practicing with whoever's around, practice speaking about yourself, where you come from, and what you do. This is very, very important, especially in part one, because that's where these questions are going to be asked. And again, this is all about you, so make sure that you're speaking about yourself correctly. All right. Next, practice writing sentences using commas and full stops correctly. Now, it says writing, but this also helps with speaking. All right. So when you have it written down, it will make a big difference when you say it out loud. So, for example, if the sentence was, Anne was waiting for the bus, but the bus was late. Okay. Do you see how that was just in one stretch? I just said Anne was waiting for the bus, but the bus was late, right? So when you write it down, it would be Anne was waiting for the bus, comma, but the bus was late. So when you say it, it's Anne was waiting for the bus, but the bus was late. Okay, so make sure that you know when to pause, where to pause. So when you're writing down the sentences as well, this is kind of like a exercise that can help you with both your speaking and your writing. Okay, so just practice writing those sentences and saying it out loud so you know where to pause and where to, you know, connect your sentences and where to put your full stops. Because again, when you're speaking, it's very, very important to understand pauses. Now, you can't give too much of a pause, but you can give a slight pause. And also, you shouldn't sound monotonous. So when I read it at the beginning, Anne was waiting for the bus, but the bus was late, right? It just probably would have gone through the examiner's ear. All right. So make sure you don't sound monotonous. You give that appropriate pause. You modulate your voice. Okay. So all this is about practicing speaking as well. Okay. And also practice using longer sentences by adding reasons why you like something or adding adjectives and adverbs to make your description more interesting. All right. So and if the examiner asks you one thing and you just answer straight to the point, what happens is the examiner will keep asking you questions because it's strictly time. Now they have to ask you certain things in that amount of time. So if you give them more time to ask you questions, sometimes the questions that they ask you tend to get more difficult and it could rattle you up a bit. So the advice that I would give is don't talk too less, don't talk too much, say just about the right things, okay? And how you can do that is just by adding, like we just talked about, adding something, reasons why you liked it, why you didn't like it, add adjectives, adverbs. That comes under grammar and it also comes under vocabulary. So it'll boost your score. All right. Okay, so that was what we have for improving your grammar for the IELTS speaking exam. All right, I hope this Nebula talk you were able to understand the different common mistakes, the common mistakes that could be made during the exam and how to improve your grammar for the exam. All right, so once you understand the common mistakes, you'll be able to know how to overcome them. All right, so the main thing that I would like to leave you all with is practice, practice, practice. Make sure that you practice speaking all the time. All right, get somebody, have a speaking partner if you need to, and just keep practicing and go through the different grammar rules and grammar tenses, everything that you can about grammar as well. Don't focus too much on it, but again, remember that it is 25% of your score, so give it some importance, but don't stress about it too much. All right, thank you so much for joining today's talk. I hope to see you in the next talk. Also, if you do require any assistance with IELTS, you can always contact me. I'm available on nebula.com. And I also have personal guidance sessions and other Nebula talks related to IELTS, so do check them out. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you soon.